It was beginning of fall, and the leaves did so with every gust of wind. As was commonplace for early mornings in Virginia, a dense and wet fog filled the sky like a spider's web filling a passage. Thus was the day some 20 years ago when I first saw them. They broke through the mist one by one like ghosts coming out of the land of shadows. When the last of them were revealed, there stood before me some 40 persons, a microcosm of society at large. Every color was represented, from black to white and all colors in between. Ages ranged from the very young to the ancient. The undisputed ruler of this society of travelers was a large black male. How he became the ruler, whether by election or a coup, I do not know. I do know that out of all those present, that he was the only one who stood out. It wasn't just because he was so much larger than the rest, though I admit that did play a role. There was something else. His eyes, like deep pools of water, implied mystery and wisdom. He seemed to have an understanding that transcended the mundane. Upon further observation, hiding behind a veneer of confidence, I also saw pain and a profound sadness. And though his lessons and suffering probably occurred years prior, their influence still remained. Nevertheless, despite the toil and trouble he experienced in youth, his latter stages were spent giving orders as opposed to receiving. I watched him as he communicated with his compatriots. Perhaps I watched too long. Feeling my presence, he turned his head and faced me. Our eyes met. He flashed me a grin sly and toothy. I could see by his disposition that he was supremely confident. Surrounded by his entourage, he stood there with his head held high, and he walked with that kind of lazy swagger that only comes about through years of command. Though he may not have been treated well by society at large, among his league he was treated like a king. When he approached, they seemed ever so slightly to lower their heads in respect. When he spoke, they obeyed without question. They obeyed without question. Like a wandering band of gypsies, his posse followed him from town to town. It was impressive. I had never seen anyone with so much authority. He ordered them about like dogs, and they, for whatever reason, followed. I often wondered its rank. What title did he hold over them? Not being a member, I never discovered his true title. But judging by his influence, I imagined that they called him by some royal name like Caesar. On a moment's notice, this motley group would pack up and move from town to town. They never stayed in the city limits. Town folks, especially the ones with little children, had too many fears. And the city governors, too many rules. In recognition of the trepidation they instilled, Caesar and company wisely stayed on the fringes, venturing into town only at night. Not holding any real jobs, the group made their living by whatever means they could. Begging and stealing was the occupation of choice. And yet it was not their profession, or lack thereof, that attracted me to these cultural rebels. It was their freedom. In them I saw liberty I'd never seen before, and more than likely would never see again. With the expansion of civilization, the Bohemians have all but disappeared, and the era of the gypsy is fast coming to an end. Not being shackled by car payments, imprisoned by a mortgage, this disparate collection of people were the happiest ones I'd ever seen. In my mind, I imagined what life would be like if I moved out of town and joined this Caesar and his merry band of seekers. With no job, no school, no rules, I could live off the land like my ancestors of old. Further, when pressed, I could be like Robin the Hood, stealing from the wealthy and giving to the poor. I toyed with the idea as we traveled down road. The possibilities for adventure, for excitement, seemed endless. When I could no longer contain my excitement, I turned to one of my housemaids. She was a young woman, so in her mid-20s. Would you be mad if I moved out of town and joined them for a little bit? She thought my idea ridiculous. Turning her face to one side, she tried hard to keep from laughing. You can't do that, she said. In a way, these were the very things I sought to escape: social standing, rules, judgment. Why not? I said aloud. I can do it if I want. I could tell I struck a chord. The car slowed, then came to a stop. Look out there, she said. That's a pack of wild dogs. They eat little boys. For a moment, there was silence. My mother stared at me, and I at her. Then, like a pot of milk coming to a boil from the back seat, I heard yelps and barks, snickers and giggles, finally unfettered laughter. My brother and sisters laughed long and hard. They laughed so long, so hard that I began to laugh too. That day I discovered a valuable lesson. Just because one smiles doesn't necessarily mean he's happy to see you. There's more to a smile than meets the eye.